Okay. I'm gonna go back to the whole discussion on Islam because I see some things online from like some Roman Catholic apologists. They're claiming that Saint Gregory Palamas believed that Christians and Muslims worship the same God. And yeah, there was this article here that I want to share. So let me see some of the important paragraphs here. Okay. So for he says here, in number 8, says, "For the impious and God hated, the utterly abominable nation boasts that they have prevailed over the Romans on account of the love of God. They ignore that this world lies under the power of the evil one, and that the greater part of it is largely in the possession of the wicked, the slaves of the infernal powers, and those who drive out their neighbors by force of arms. That is why, for the whole time of the Constantine, who reigned truly in the love of God, idolaters ruled almost the whole world. And for a long time afterwards, others who differed not at all or only in a little from their predecessors. It therefore seems to me that those who boast of their evil will suffer the same as the Greeks, who the apostles said were given up to a debased mind. Because although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or worship him, since they too know Christ, for they say that he is the Logos and Spirit of God, and also that he was born from a virgin, and acted and taught in a divine manner, and was taken up into heaven, and remains immortal, and will come to judge the entire universe. Since therefore they know Christ in this fashion, they have not glorified him as Christ, that is, as the Word who was God-man, but they have exchanged the truth for a lie, and have believed in, worshipped, and followed a mere man who was mortal and was buried, this Muhammad, rather than the God-man Logos, who is everlasting and eternal, and who even though he tasted death in the flesh, it was in order to abolish death and become the author of eternal and unfading life, which the passion, death, and resurrection of a mere man could never have been able to provide. This is also why all the resurrected who have lived in a mortal life have died again, whereas Christ, having risen from the dead, is no longer dominated by death, but rather it is the future eternal life that is foreshown. For since those of whom I speak knew Christ, but did not honor him or worship him as Christ, God gave them over to a debased mind, into the passions and degrading acts, which would result with them that live in a manner that is shameful and inhuman and hated by God, and like Esau, who from childhood was hated by God and rejected by his father's blessing, lived by the bow, the sword, and debauchery, reveling in the acts of enslavement, murder, pillage, abduction, licentiousness, adultery, and unnatural lust. And not only do such things, but what madness! They think that they are pleasing God by them. That is why I myself think about them, now that I have come to more accurate knowledge of their ways. Yeah, do you have anything to say about that?
Yes, so I'm not sure why someone was trying to use this to suggest that they believe in the same God, because it's quite clear that they worship a lie. They're not worshiping the same God. Obviously, if you're worshiping a lie, you cannot be worshiping the truth. And God is truth. So anyone who's worshiping a lie is not worshiping the same God. They acknowledge, this is again the distinction right from the beginning. We're talking about the claim that they know Christ. They state things. They've read about him, and they make certain statements about him that from the scriptures or thing, and they sort of make a claim for that. But then they deny him. They do not worship, and they deny some aspect of him, some part. They do not see him as God, man. So they effectively worship a lie. So there's a claim of following Christ. There's a claim of God. But that's quite different from actually believing in Christ as Christ is, who he is in truth, or believing in God as he is. And therefore, because they don't believe him as he is, they're believing a lie. They're not believing the same God. They're believing something else, their imagination and an idol in their head of what God is. So I think this just reinforces through all his writings that he acknowledges the claim as sort of that they state that they worship Christ. And yes, you can see that the identifier is the one that's in the New Testament. They're claiming to worship that Christ. but then they distort, they deny him as he truly is, and end up worshipping something else.
Right. Yeah, and it goes on to say here in number 23, and according to you as well, it is Christ who will come to judge of the whole human race. Is therefore to him that you should address your prayers and supplications. Should you too not invoke him as God like we do, since we know that he is indivisible from the Father as his innate word. For there was no time when God was irrational or without his innate word. And then it goes on later, it says that he judges, as you yourself say, the living and the dead. So, I mean, it's pretty much just saying, I mean, this is what you guys claim, right?
Yeah. It's good. It's just saying, this is what you claim. He's going to come back. Whether you're just coming back as a man or as a prophet or judge, they don't see him as God. So, yeah, it's a claim again that you will do this, but why? You're not actually believing that. You're believing something else, because you're not. If you were believing that properly, why aren't you invoking? Why aren't you praying to him? No, you're not. You're just a claim. It's just an empty claim.
Yeah, so he's rather chastising them for this. I mean,
yeah. He's saying, look, well, you claim all this and that, but you're not believing it. You're doing the opposite.
Right. I mean, compare that to Vatican II, which says they hold with esteem the Muslims, and they say they worship, that they worship the same God as we do. We worship him together. Now that's far from what St. Gregory Palamas is saying here.
Yeah, it is far away. Yes.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to talk about this too much here. Unless you had anything else to say about this.
No, I think we've just pointed out that a failure to make a distinction between the so-called claim or profession to believe something and the actual belief in it, which is due to the proper definition of what you believe in and a true definition. Because obviously, if you don't define it properly, you claim it to be something else, then you're worshipping a lie. And therefore, you're worshipping Satan, who's the father of lies. That's the only other option there. So they're not worshipping the true God, they're worshipping Satan at best.
Right. Now, there's also this claim that back in, I believe, like the 12th century, there was a situation with the Emperor Manuel Comnenus, that he got rid of this anathematization that the Orthodox held, that you had anathematized the God of Muhammad before you converted to the church. So yeah, I don't know if you had anything. I mean, if you had any knowledge of this.
Yes, so I've heard about this. For 5 centuries or so since Islam, part of becoming Orthodox from Islam was to reject the God of Islam. And for some reason, the emperor decided he wanted to remove that clause from there for some political reason. The bishops all opposed him and found that it was ridiculous to do that. But eventually, over time, he seemed to get his way, and they removed that clause, which sort of became in that particular reception text became sort of more standardized one. But it was definitely in opposition to the bishops initially. Why they gave in, maybe political pressure, etc. Or maybe it was just decided that while this is true that they should be anathematizing their God, there's a sufficient anathematizations in other ways there that there may be an economy for sake of making it a little easier for people to convert or come into the church. I don't know all the background reasons what's going on in the bishop's mind. All I know is they were all on side that we should be anathematizing God. They weren't believing in the same God. They should be anathematizing their belief. And that they decided to drop it off wasn't because they suddenly changed their mind that this was wrong. There may have been some other political or economic reason for that. It didn't turn around and go, oh, we've all been making this mistake for the last 5 centuries on this matter. It could be explained by some sort of economy. So it certainly doesn't mean that the church believes that the Islam has the same God. That's why they removed it. No, the discussion is definitely not about that, and some sort of change of opinion on that particular point.
Yeah, it seems rather more of like a diplomatic approach that the emperor
Yes, I
was
think that'd
taking.
be the best way to describe it, and we can't read too much into it. Yes, it's interesting. Perhaps it's a little sad that they removed it. Maybe it's a little bit of emperor over church power games, which is not so good. But it certainly doesn't support that the Orthodox Church as a body, as a whole, as by definition, accepts that the Muslims worship the same God as the Christians. Not at all. It only shows opinion one emperor, and that the bishops of that time and space gave into that. So it's not a document that reflects the actual position of the Orthodox Church, which is a position of Christ ultimately, as manifest through the scriptures and the ecumenical councils. This is where we see his will and his opinion, and we hope to be consistent with these things. And occasionally things are consistent, some occasionally things are inconsistent. But not every document is written by a bishop or a synod of bishops or emperor necessarily represents the teaching of the Orthodox Church. That is what's seen in the scriptures and the ecumenical councils. That is our teaching as defined in these documents and expressed through those recognized holy fathers that are consistent, especially great ones of Basil the Great, Gregory, John Chrysostom, and Gregory the theologian, who are the ecumenical teachers. And so we follow there, just as you read out from Chrysostom. His authority is very, very high. It's just next to the ecumenical councils and the scriptures. So his opinion on this stands very, very high. And we can't go into open contradiction to this unless you've shown his opinion is contrary to all the other fathers and ecumenical councils themselves. But it's not. It's consistent with the way we've been talking and the ecumenical councils, and even with the bishop himself in this particular case. So we simply cannot say that this represents the church. We don't invent doctrine, change doctrines, modify doctrines in the Orthodox Church as the Roman Catholics do. That's why we don't need constant ecumenical councils and stuff. The doctrines are one and the same from the apostles and carry on. So what's been said is said. We're not open to redefinition or revisiting or changing or removing or updating, etc. Any such thing is not orthodoxy. That it's another type of religion.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and overall, I mean, like from the sources that I see, that I mean, most of the bishops at that time were against this, and they did, in fact, anathematize the God of Muhammad before this. And then it says even afterwards, I mean, it was ignored. I mean, this whole change that they supposedly made. So it was not like a dogmatic declaration from the church. This is more just like a pragmatic kind of, like you say, like economy, like, not to just make things more difficult than it needs to be for Muslims to convert. So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't such a big deal that people are making this out to be.
Yes.
Yeah. And just let me read this real quick here. Yeah, it says, thus, Manuel was arguing on a theological basis, but was also keen on adopting a pragmatic policy on conversion that seems to have worked well in Iconium. This was to be based on a traditional, but also a renewed Western stance of viewing Islam as a heresy. From the description given by Nikitas Koniatis, the Byzantine clergy were in no way enthusiastic supporters of this. They were much more in agreement with the harsh condemnations found in anti-Islamic polemicists as Nikitas, Byzantius, and in the abjuration formula contemporary with him. Also, the high position of many Turks, Emmanuel's administration and army had been attacked by many, and this aversion may have added to the rejection of his proposals. Whether believing this to be a wise policy or seeing it as a true expression of their belief, the Byzantine bishops insisted on viewing Islam as a religion completely foreign to their world. The Byzantine abjuration formula had been produced at a time when Byzantium felt it had the upper hand in dealings with the Muslim world. By the end of the reign of Manuel, after defeat of I cannot pronounce that name. In the improbability of ever recapturing southern Anatolia. The views expressed in it did not support a pragmatic attitude towards conversion. Manuel wanted to change this, not least in view of this successful policy in Iconium and the new intellectual attitudes in the West towards Islam. He made attempts to convince the ecclesiastical leaders of the wisdom of his policy. His tomos was allowed to pass, but his text never became a new procedure for converts from Islam. Still, his attempted reform deserves recognition for being forward-looking.
Forward-looking is if looking forward to our days as a good thing or more accurate thing or a thing we should be looking towards. It's a very modern concept imposed back on that.
Right. Yeah. So that's just some of the background here. I think this is from the article, One God or Two, the Rationality Behind Manuel the First Comnenus Attempted Reform of the Abjuration Formula for Converts from Islam. So, it's not really such a big deal as some people are making this out to be, especially Roman Catholic apologists.
It certainly doesn't prove anything that the Orthodox Church believes that they believe the same God. That's reading far, far too much.